This is Paul from Eon's Abyss, and you are listening to Matt Massacre on Straight to the Core podcast.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Matt Massacre, host of Straight to the Core podcast, and I am sitting here with the guys in Divided by Design from Leeds, UK. I was going to say their names, but I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves. So take it away, guys. Tell us who you are, what you do in the band, and a little bit about yourself. Whoever wants to go first, don't matter.
Well, I'm Liam. I'm the lead guitarist. Yeah.
And the vocalist, yeah?
Yeah, the instrumental music, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Shall I go next? Okay, well, I'm Tom. I'm the new guy. I'm the drummer, and I'm sort of in charge of slaving away at each track individually to try and make them sound listenable. Kind of my job.
That just leaves me. I'm Joe. I'm the bass player, and me and Liam are the original members that have been going with the project for a few years now. And Tom's come along and shot us into a relatively new sort of amount of success.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So you guys are a instrumental progressive metal band with no vocals, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And you guys just released your new album, Stages to Osiris, I believe on the 14th of this month, correct?
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
So how, for those of you that might have not heard of these guys before, Divided by Design, this is their fourth appearance on the podcast, which is insane to me because it's the most, this band has appeared on this podcast more often than any other band. And every time they've appeared has been just singles that they've dropped. And this is the first time they've dropped an entire album. So was the process from dropping singles, single by single, more difficult, or just dropping an entire album at once more difficult?
Well, it was kind of, this has been the plan kind of since we initially contacted you. All this stuff's been written for ages.
Okay.
And we were like, let's just do singles to kind of build an audience and then release the concept album we were kind of working on for ages. That was kind of the goal.
The goal in mind. So there was a definite mindset going into it. You wanted to go this route.
Yeah, it was quite interesting though while we were recording this, because although it's an album, it was still sort of released as singles. Because the way we did it was we'd record a song, or at least with up until parts 4 and 5, we record a song, release it as part 1, and then record the next one, part 2, which for me was very unusual because obviously usually when you record an album, you usually do it in one sitting. Well, not one sitting, but you get it all done, all dusted, and then you send out whatever you want into the world, singles, full album, whatever it is. But we did it a very, very weird way. But it was nice, kind of.
Yeah.
It was nice once they were out. It was kind of like, it's all right.
Right.
Yeah, we wanted to do it as, like, that's why the naming convention for the album's a bit strange. Is because we wanted to keep the single thing going, but we wanted to keep it as once it was all out, it was a big project and you could see it was that. So people would then listen to the whole thing. We kind of thought about a lot of this stuff quite a bit because like it's really annoying because coming from like the prog scene, releasing big albums is kind of the thing.
Right.
And it's something we want to do, but in kind of the music industry now, it's not as viable. So if we just dropped an album, I would safely say half of the songs probably won't get that many listens. Whereas if we release each song individually, and then we release it as an album, they all kind of get their time to shine. And
that's a very good way to think about it, especially in the digital age today. It's really hard for younger bands to get, you know, because you're right. Most people they'll go on Spotify or whatever their main source of streaming is, or YouTube or what have you. They'll listen to the first two tracks and this is all right, and then move on. They don't listen to the whole thing. So that's a good way to do it. That's very smart, and I never would have. Then again, I'm not a musician, so I don't even know half this. You know, so that's a different mindset for sure.
It was all like with me and Joe. We kind of planned all this out, and then Tom joined, and the fact that he could record and produce it all for us just made it so much easier to pull it off. Really.
Right, you know? For sure. So do you guys? So Tom, do you handle all the recording and mastering and mixing and everything? Kind of what you said in the beginning?
I do. Well, for the most part, for this album, because obviously lockdown was in effect and everything.
Right.
That made it a little bit harder for the production side, because obviously, well, for one thing, Joe's in Southampton, is it?
Yeah.
Which from where I am is a long way. And then luckily Liam's a bit closer, but it's long distances.
Right.
So when it came to recording the album, we literally had to do it. They'd record it at home. They'd send me what they got, and then I'd have to go through it, edit it, do whatever needs sprinkling on top,
and then send it back. And then we're like,
and then send it back, and you're like, is that any good? No. Yeah, there was quite a lot of that, but it was quite a nice way of working though, because you know the response was usually very quick from both of them. They usually both had pretty clear idea of what needed to change and whatnot, especially Joe. Joe was very good for that. He would give a very, very, very exact little thing that would need changing, but changing that made it completely
Joe was much better than me. I was like, that twiddly bit, change that.
Yeah, that's it. You know what you're talking about, but we don't. You know, so if we could translate what you meant by that little twiddly bit of something or other, it would be better. But sometimes it doesn't quite work like that. But yeah, I handled all of the mixing and production editing side of it, and then a colleague of mine handled the mastering for it.
Well, I imagine as a younger band, financially speaking, it's probably a good thing to have a member of the band that's knowledgeable in mastering.
Yeah. That's the main reason I got this gig, wasn't it? Really, let's be honest. I had a little bit of a studio. Yeah, let's get him in.
Yeah, for sure. I think apart from. I was going to say that. Yeah. Sorry, my internet's a little bit bad. But yeah, I was just going to say, apart from the sort of financial side of things, having Tom in the band and being self-contained means that we're able to work on a track and get it from the rehearsal room out there in a couple of months if we really push it. And it's just allowed us to really pick up some momentum that if we were going to someone else and paying lots of money and traveling to different studios, it would have been a slower and more expensive process, I think.
That's a good point. Sure. That's a very good point.
It also lets us kind of make exactly what we want, because everyone who's involved in making it is part of the band and knows what we're making. You know? Very true too. Whereas our first two songs, so Polar and The Catalyst, those were with a different producer, and at the time it was good, but they would change stuff and not do exactly what we wanted, which is it's fine in some context, but when you're kind of making like a project that's kind of continuing through the songs, it kind of helps that like this instrument needs to be here, so make sure it's there.
Right, because you guys know what you want and know the outcome that ultimately you want to achieve. So together, there's no middleman. Like, well, maybe you should do it this way. No, I wrote it this way for a reason. This is how I want it done. I'm paying, not the other way around.
To be fair, there were a few instances of that kind of thing where I'd say to Liam, like, have you thought about maybe kind of changing that, and the response was just no. Which, to
But
be
it
fair,
works
now
out in the
makes
end.
sense.
The thing is,
Exactly,
I know
yeah.
kind of, I hear the finished thing, because well, with this album, I wrote the kind of the skeleton, and then the other two added their parts. Some of the earlier songs, it was me and Joe writing them together. But yeah, so I provide the skeleton, so I know what I want it to sound like, and then Joe will add a bass part I'd never even thought of. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then Tom does the drum.
Right.
Yeah.
Then I have my bits, and then you go.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that snare. It's not in the right spot.
Not in the right spot. So when it comes to stages to Osiris, I keep wanting to say of. I don't know why.
Yeah.
For stages to Osiris, it's a concept album. So tell us a little bit about the story that's trying to be told here, track by track.
Who wants to tackle this? I'll take it.
I can give a.
I'll do it then.
Yeah.
So it's
you go for it.
So it's a 5-part thing, obviously, and each song is based on a different stage of grief. And to an extent, it's kind of audience interpretation, like what it, because there's no lyrics, there's no like story, really. But from my perspective, the reason it's called Orion 1 Denial and so on is because that's the character, and in kind of that mythology, Osiris is the god of the afterlife. That's why the album's called that instead of Orion.
Okay. That was gonna be my next question.
Yeah,
okay.
that's why we thought about. It was going to be called Orion, and then it was like this. It works for the songs, but it's a bit doesn't say anything.
Right. Okay.
For the title.
That makes sense.
So if you kind of delve into the music theory of the songs, which we can get into if you want. I don't know how much people want to know about that stuff, but there's a lot of like hidden stuff, and a lot of it actually ties back into the catalyst, that song, especially with the last 2 songs of the album.
Okay.
So the kind of initial concept was the catalyst was the start of the concept, and then the stage of the grief is because of that. Kind of.
It's starting to make more sense when you were talking about you had all this pre-planned, and this is like the ultimate goal.
Yeah,
the catalyst.
This is like the Avengers, you know.
Right.
It's the end of phase 1.
It's the end of phase 1, right?
And then we introduce more characters later, maybe. I don't know.
Where the hell's stage 2 gonna go? Phase 2,
Yeah.
we have no idea yet.
No.
Yeah.
So as a band that's an instrumental band, when you guys play live, because it's a funny story, like for people that don't really know what progressive metal is and like instrumental metal is, the biggest band that I could compare Divided by Design to is probably Animals as Leaders. 3-piece, instrumental, progressive, and one funny story, I think I told this before on the podcast, but I'm gonna tell it again because it's a good story. But Tosin Abasi, you guys are probably familiar with him, the guitar player for Animals as Leaders. I saw them live a few years ago, and people were so amazed at the sounds that were coming from his hands playing the guitar. Everybody was just staring like, what the
Yeah.
And he stopped after one of his songs, and he comes up to the mic, the most timid voice you've ever heard. He's like, hey guys, you know you can move, right?
Oh.
And but where was I going with this? I don't remember. So when you guys are playing live, do you guys experience the same thing where people are like, where's the vocalist? For people that don't know you, I should say. I mean, I'm sure people in your area know who you are, but for newcomers that have seen you for the first time, do you have people come up to you and be like, where's the vocalist? How come you guys don't have a vocalist?
I think we really we're quite different from we're similar in many ways musically to bands like Animals as Leaders, but in terms of the live experience, I think we're really trying to achieve something quite different. The energy is more like a punk band. We're running around trying to get the crowd going. I don't think we give them a chance to think about what's missing. We
Okay,
put so
very
much
cool.
in their faces.
Yeah, that, like before all the lockdown stuff happened, we did a mini tour in the UK, and I remember Joe was like kicking over mic stands and stuff, and all sorts, and we're wireless for the whole thing, so we're jumping in the crowd and kind of going crazy, really.
There you go.
Yeah.
I remember that gig that he kicked that mic stand over. That was Newcastle, I think, wasn't it? And it was the last song, wasn't it? I think. And you kicked the mic stand over, which still had the mic on it, and the mic went slam into the ground, pop shield first, right into the ground. And after when he did, I was just thinking, oh my god, the sound guy's going to kill us. He's going to give us a right field day. We're going to have to buy him a new mic. And then the sound guy came over after we were packing down to come off and just went, well done, guys. That was really good. I was really impressed with that. Well done. Nothing about them. Yeah, all right.
There you go.
Yeah, I think the way we perform surprises people because they expect us to kind of be stood playing the tracks.
Right.
Like, because they sound complex.
They do, very
They
complex.
are to an extent, but there's always sections in the tracks that have room to move. And like, the way they're composed is kind of, there's lots of ups and downs and room to breathe. So when the complex stuff happens, it's a lot more impactful, especially live as well.
Last night, I finally found some time to listen to Stages to Osiris front to back after work when I was driving home. And when I was driving, as I was listening to the track, some of the atmospheric sections that you guys got going on in the album, I found myself daydreaming. Like I found myself get taken to like somewhere. I don't know where I was going, but I just felt my brain like go off somewhere. And then like those heavier parts that you were talking about kick in. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? What is that?
Yeah.
So it's a definite. I mean, for the listeners that are watching and or listening to this interview, definitely check out Stages to Osiris. It will take you to a different place for sure. As the tracks go on, there's like, I feel like there's different instruments besides just drum, guitar, and bass. There's like violin in there somewhere. Like,
yeah. That was a big thing. That was the violin stuff.
So who plays the violin? Or is it just
the violin, and there's throughout that particular section at the end of
it's the end of the album, right?
It's in part 5.
Right.
We have a violin, viola, and cello. The violin, viola are played by my mother.
Oh, very cool.
And she's a violin and viola player, and she'd do it for nothing.
Fair point.
We're gonna go with.
All right.
And then the cello player was forgive me, I cannot remember her name. She's a very, very lovely person. She works for the Lincolnshire Music Service. She's a cello player. I think she's credited. I think, isn't she? So we'll remember.
Yeah, made sure.
Yeah. So check out the credits for it. She's in there. But she's very, very good. Absolutely brilliant player. And the rest of it is just Liam messing about on stock plugins that he's got on Reaper. Like, the thing is on their own they sound awful. With everything else, they sound amazing. There's never been one that he sent me that I want to get rid of. It's always no. You've got to keep that. That's going in. Absolutely.
It's kind of where the kind of video game inspiration comes from, because I really like all old Nintendo games and stuff like that, and I love the music from it. And technically, it's bad, like sounds. Right. I mean, yeah. But I love taking them and like, it reminds me of old Zelda games and stuff like that. I just like how they sound. And then when I put the heavy guitars over it, kind of, it's kind of unique.
I think you guys did like an 8-bit version of, was it Polara? I think you guys did an 8-bit version of.
Yeah.
How hard was that to transfer from?
That was someone else that did it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was working with a guy called H. Mister, who's a DJ kind of 8-bit producer, and we we have to give him a lot of credit for it, because we sent him the stems and then sort of talked through about what we wanted the track to sound like, what we wanted to achieve with it. And he sort of transcribed it and shifted it substantially, but it's so recognizable as the original track. The original track was in 15/8 and the 8-bit version's in 4/4, but it's got the same elements of melody in there, and all the recognizable hooks are still in there. So he did a really good job.
Yeah, I remember listening to it. I think the first episode you guys were on was one of the single-digit episodes, which is crazy to think that 30 episodes later, you guys are here again. But I remember, I think was it the Catalyst that was the first one? The first single you guys released?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So it must have been that episode where I played the Catalyst and I listened to Polara, and then I listened to the 8-bit version. I'm like, what the this is badass. This is crazy. How, like, you listen to the actual version and then you listen to the 8-bit version, and it's like so similar but not at the same time. And that's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's what we really liked about it. It was because some people would just complete copy and paste and make it exactly the same, but it was you could tell, as Joe said, it was all the elements were there, but it was its own thing.
Right. So I feel like progressive metal is really the only genre in metal to where you could be an instrumental band and it still catch an ear. Because I feel like if you had vocals in the progressive genre, it'll take away from the technicality and the musicianship in the instrumentals. Because I've seen Liam, because me and you were friends in our personal Facebooks, and sometimes Liam will post playthroughs of him playing, and I'm just like, what how are you doing this? And I feel like if you put vocals in front of those sounds that you're making with that guitar, it would take away from the beauty of what you're writing. And same for the rest of the band.
Yeah, 100%. Like, there's a lot of people who aren't quite in that genre that I've shown the music to, and they're like, oh, it's good, but what if there was a singer? And I think if there was any there's no room for vocals in the first place. And if there was, it, as you said, it would totally take away from it, I think.
Right. So do you find it when Liam sends you guys, this is more for Tom and Joe, when Liam sends you riffs and shit that he's written, I shouldn't say shit as a bad thing, but whatever. But the stuff that he's written, you find it like, how the fuck are you doing this, man? Like, stop it.
Well, it's weird because when me and Liam first started sort of playing together back, this would have been about 3 years ago now. Some of the stuff would blow my mind, and I'd have to sit down for a lot of hours and work out what was being done and how I could bring it to the bass. But we've both grown sort of together, and we now sort of have an understanding of I get what he does, and I feel like I can add something to that. I've definitely got better understanding what's going on.
Well, there's stuff in this album. When Joe sent it, I was like, what's going on here then?
So now Joe's getting payback, right?
It's shifted. Yeah, it's like, I need to step my game up now
right.
to compete.
Yeah. For me, it was a bit it's a bit different because, well, I've known you, Liam, for God knows how many years now. And I've always known you to write stupid riffs like that. So as soon as you send me something, I know to expect it. Like it's gonna out weird the last one, but that's a good thing a lot of the time.
Yeah. Well, one of like the earliest things of the band I remember was because me and Joe went to uni together. Was me sat in Joe's room, and I was coming up with a Catalyst riff, the beginning of it. And Joe was like, oh, I've got this really sick riff. And then, so he comes up with the kind of intro. And then I was like, how about we go to this weird tapping thing? and then it was literally after that rehearsal that I went and wrote that song and then gave it back to Joe. It was kind of from there, the band kind of went somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To kind of piggyback on what Joe said, this is more for you. Working with Liam in this band, do you feel like it's helped you grow as a musician and your bass playing ability and your skills? Trying to
Absolutely. because a lot of the time, Liam will be playing something that might be a mad sweep picking type passage, and to be able to do that on the bass, I might have to tap it, for example, and that I might have to sit down and slow it down and break it down, just to be able to get the mechanics right on a bass. But then when you speed it up and you put it back together again, we're playing something very similar at points, and I think that's really cool.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. So, kind of a question for Tom. Coming into this, knowing that it was going to be a progressive style band, did you know that your drumming would have to be pretty unconventional, if you will, more so than a different genre, I should say?
Well, yeah, definitely. Because, well, going into it, like I said, I've known Liam for a good many years. We grew up liking the similar kind of bands that the drummers did similar things, like Dream Theater and
Right.
Rush. Their drummers are incredibly complex and very talented. So I knew going in that it was probably going to be somewhere in that region of complexity. But a lot of the time, it was the thing that I had to get my head around was following Joe a lot more, because my parts tend to follow what Joe's doing a lot more than what the guitar is doing, which is really nice because it helps mold together a really, really tight rhythm section that, even though we're a progressive band and it's weird and stuff's going on, it does make the audience kind of go, bob your heads to it.
It worked for me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there we go.
Because I told Liam, I wanted to listen to the album front, since it was a concept album. I wanted to listen to it 1 to 5. I don't want to listen to 1 and then 3 hours later listen to 2. Whenever I have time, I wanted to dedicate an hour front to back, and that's what I did. And like I said, I was mesmerized. I didn't mean to cut you off, Joe. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to sort of talk about. I think it speaks of our process that Liam's got the original skeleton of the song, and then it'll get passed down to me to sort of build a scratch bass track with the initial sort of outline of what I'm thinking of doing, passed to Tom, and then it sort of goes from back to front again, and then Tom does what he thinks will work, and then it gets passed back again, and there's a lot of to and fro that really develops different elements of the track and sort of fine tunes every section.
Yeah, I remember in part 3, the negotiation, there's like a really quick section and then a solo, and I had a original demo solo, and at the time it was like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And then Joe then does the bass, and as Joe was saying, back and forth, and then it comes to me to track the guitar. I'm like, there could be something totally different here, like compared to all the others, because at that point in the album there's been like the sweepy thing, the tappy thing. I had to kind of do something else.
Right.
So yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. So you got Tom. You kind of mentioned it with Dream Theater and Rush and stuff. What are kind of your, I guess it's kind of individual question for each one of you. For your main inspirations to write the style of music that is Divided by Design, what are some of your main influences, either as bands or individual musicians, or how did you come about being the musicians you are today? I guess that's the easiest way I could put it. I don't know.
I guess that's kind of an individual thing, isn't it? Do you want to field up first, Liam, and we'll go around?
Yeah, fine. Yeah. Well, like as I mentioned earlier, I used to play lots of video games. Right. I remember like learning the tunes on the piano from like Zelda and stuff. So I've always had that kind of ingrained in my kind of musical DNA, I guess. And then I got into guitar music when I met Tom, when we were like 13. And I got really into power metal for a while.
There you go.
Like Dragon Force. So I was really into shreddy stuff.
Shreddy stuff.
And then I found Dream Theater, and it just blew my mind. It was like, how are they making this?
Right.
And then like Steve Vai and stuff like that. More kind of less full-on metal and more kind of instrumental guitar and like fusion-y jazz stuff as well. But the root is metal always.
Always, right. I don't know, Tom, you want to go next?
Yeah, I can do. Well, yeah, like we mentioned earlier, Dream Theater and Rush. For me, it was Rush that were more of an influence on me, and then Liam introduced me to Dream Theater further down the line when we kind of met. Well, a little bit after we met. Further on from that, there was, I'd say, joining the band took me to a whole new level of listening to things. I was kind of melling with the idea of listening to heavier music, like metalcore and things like that, but I hadn't really explored it too much. I'd listened to a few songs, but after that I started listening to bands like Architects, Polaris, Tesseract, Periphery, Animals as Leaders, obviously. Bands where, again, the rhythm section is just really, really tight, and a lot of the time the drums heavily follow what's going on, syncopated rhythms,
Right.
that make you bob your head, essentially, which going into this band was very important in a lot of aspects.
Right. But very cool.
That's me.
Joe, what about you?
So I've been sort of listening to a lot of heavier rock and metal stuff for most of my life. Bands like Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden were really influential on me as a sort of foundation, and then it sort of developed from there and to the more progressive side of things. And as Tom says, bands like Periphery, Intervals, really, really inspirational in how they're pushing boundaries. I think Nolly Get Good of Periphery, when he was playing bass for them, obviously,
Right.
he was an inspirational player. He's just so clean, and his technique is really something that I sort of strive to achieve. But the whole time I'm looking at these players and thinking what they're doing is really cool. How can I sort of copy that? I'm also thinking, what can I do to not be like them? What can I do to sort of introduce my own style and sort of build on what I've done before?
There you go. Very cool. I'm always curious on how musicians kind of get to where, what inspired them to get to where they are today. Because I don't know how to play an instrument, really. I mean, I could pick up a guitar and maybe learn something, but like, I'm not in a band. I've never been in a band. So for me, getting that kind of knowledge and getting to know you guys better as musicians, it's really cool just to hear what inspired you to ultimately become Divided by Design at the end.
Well, in terms of the band, though, we very much wanted to take all the inspiration that we had and figure out a way of doing it differently to an extent. Like we knew we didn't want to go full genty mode,
Right,
like
right.
all these newer ones. We wanted to kind of take all these kind of things that we loved about playing and kind of craft it into something that we hadn't really heard but really wanted to hear.
There you go. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I know Joe kind of mentioned Intervals, and it clicked in my head that that's a band that kind of started as just an instrumental progressive band, or gent, if you will, because that was when early 2012, the early 2010s is when like gent, genre, not a genre, that's a whole nother episode. That, early 2010s, I was all about it. I was completely focused on that style of metal, and a lot of it was instrumental, and Intervals was one of those bands that fit into that category, but then they wrote an album with vocals, and I feel like that changed the entire band. So for you guys, are you strictly going to be three-piece instrumental through and through, or has the idea of having vocals?
Well, I mean, we've already
a lot
kind of
more to
broken
do.
that.
Right.
We've already broken that with strings, haven't we? It's not
Right.
even like
Right, true.
Yeah,
essentially it's we'll have an idea, and if it kind of fits into the mindset of everyone, then we'll probably go for it. So if like something I do want to do is write another concept with like a proper story with vocals, but whether that's with this or what, I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of exciting because this is where we've been wanting to get to,
Right.
with the band. So who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I think we have a really kind of unique approach in as much as progressive music has sort of become a genre that's put it firmly in a box, and we're sort of kind of influenced by the progressive bands of the 80s, 70s and 80s, and we really want to push boundaries and be truly progressive,
Right.
meaning we want to do things that have never been done, put a horn section in a metal track with some strings and a sitar,
Right.
Yeah.
really push the boundaries.
So you want to take the word progressive as a word by definition and take the progressive genre to a different level, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I feel like a lot of these bands that are under the progressive thing are just kind of in a cycle of copying each other to an extent. Obviously, there's some really great bands that are pushing boundaries and doing really unique stuff, but
Yeah,
I think that the description's getting a bit broad now.
True. Yeah. I mean, I've heard progressive bands like trumpets and like trombones and horn sections and stuff. Or I can't remember the name of the band now, but there was a song that appeared in my Spotify, suggested thing. And I listened to it, and it's an instrumental band, and it's very groovy, and all of a sudden there's a trumpet solo. I'm like, what happened here? But that's one of those things. It's something I never heard before. So, I mean, if that's the route that you guys want to go, all of a sudden you want to have like Joe said, like a sitar solo or something. Just some guy sitting Indian style playing the sitar, Yeah. So a little bit about the album again. So you said that stages to Osiris, it's essentially following the 5 stages of grief. Is it?
Yep.
So denial, reactionary, the negotiation, collapsing reality, and the fatalist, in that order.
Yeah.
What's from start to finish? What is Orion essentially going through in the album?
Oh, sorry about
that. Well, it's kind of, to an extent, up to the audience to figure that out.
Okay.
The point was to kind of convey these different feelings through music, and so denial. There's loads of different shifting riffs. Nothing's repeated in that song really, and it was kind of meant to kind of simulate never landing on an idea really.
Okay.
And then part 2 is based on anger, so that's why it's so kind of heavy and
more aggressive.
It's constantly, it's really driving that song.
Right.
Even in the clean section, it's still kind of pushing.
It's quite dissonant as well, isn't it? Like it's very, the melody doesn't quite make sense, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, it does make sense. But it's not conventional. It's not how you'd normally do it.
Yeah, and then part 3 is bargaining. So that's why we call it the negotiation. And kind of, we probably could have pushed it a lot further, but we wanted to make sure the song was good. So there's a lot of like jumping between, like the main intro riff, it's switching between the guitar and the bass. They're like having a conversation. And then there's parts where all the instruments drop out and then it's just the guitar and then they come back in. It's stuff like that. And even like structurally, it's almost like a conversation as well. And then collapsing reality is depression. So that I don't want to give that one away, actually. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a lot of secret stuff in that.
Fair enough.
But that one very much ties in with the Catalyst.
A bit of a Morse code section in there.
Right. Yeah.
If listeners can pick that out, but
somewhere.
Right, there's a.
I still don't know what it means. I'm in the band.
and then the Fatalist Well, Joe, do you want to explain why we called it that?
Basically, it's the acceptance idea of the stages of grief, but we sort of wanted to play on whether it's a positive or negative acceptance. And the ideas of fatalism in philosophy are to do with everything being sort of pre-assigned. Everything is going to happen that happens. So it sort of asks the question of the audience whether we've reached an acceptance of a positive or negative kind. As I say, it's up to the audience to really decide what the journey means to them, and how they respond to it emotionally. I think in some ways that last part is slightly ambiguous, and open to interpretation for the audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Liam.
Well, I was just going to say, like, that's why that one's so different from the others. Like, it only works because of the tracks that come before it. Really, like the ambience of it is so kind of dramatic, coming straight off Collapsing Reality, because that is the craziest song we've got.
Right.
Probably will, right? Who knows?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
But and like that whole album, it's supposed to be ramping up in how crazy it is until that point, and that's the release. That's the kind of accepting what's before, and then all the string section is taking motifs from the earlier tracks and kind of reworking them until we land on the final riff, which we teased at the end of the cat list. So it all links to that song.
In that string section,
Yeah.
in that string section, as Liam says, we've got ideas from every part in there. If you actually go back and listen to it, it's got a reference to one, it's got a reference to 2, 3, 4, 5, and that sort of, we played around with the idea of, it's sort of like a flashback. It's sort of asking the question of how have we heard this before? Is it sort of like a past life? Is it, there's routes you can go down in the interpretation of that. Whether the acceptance is an idea of death and sort of a final ending, or it's sort of open to interpretation, as we say.
Right. Well, kind of piggybacking on that, what I said earlier, for me, when I listened to that track, the ambience at the beginning took me to a different world. I felt like I can't explain it. It's just like I was listening to it, but like I was here physically, but like my mind was somewhere else. And then that heavy ending section happened, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is nuts. Like, where happened to my vision? Where'd it go? But I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a very solid album, front to back, 1 through 5. I mean, it definitely, it takes you somewhere as the songs go, kind of how you guys just described them all. It's incredible. I love it personally. And the fact that you guys had all the way back from, I think it was episode 7, you guys were on in the beginning, and that was, when was that? October, November-ish, somewhere in there?
Yeah, it was October, I think.
Yeah.
Around then, yeah.
Last October, when you guys were on one of the first episodes of the podcast with the Catalyst, and then that leads by design, pun intended, to ultimately what we're talking about now. I just find that really fascinating and really cool that you guys had this vision from all the way in October when releasing the Catalyst to August of almost a year, full calendar year later, 10 months later, to ultimately lead the stages to Osiris. I just find that really fascinating and really cool that you guys have mentally thought this whole thing up as musicians and storytellers and everything. I just find it really neat. I find it really neat. Really cool. But yeah. Anything else? Well, one thing I wanted to add is for you guys, because you talked about the lockdown and everything. Did you find it difficult releasing an album in the madness of today? Being that you can't play out, you can't really, only way to really promote it is via the internet and via, social media and everything. Is that the most?
Well, it was annoying because we love playing live,
Right.
That's kind of what we wanted to do the band for, you know.
Right,
like
right.
We like making these silly concepts, but the live show is where it's at. But the plan was always to release the songs in the kind of that time frame, and I actually think it's helped us out, especially releasing them as individual tracks, because if we just was like, we're not going to release this because we can't gig, it would have just killed any momentum we'd been working for that the past year, you know.
Right, right.
And it kind of keeps us still relevant, even if it's only digitally relevant. So when we eventually get out of this and can play again, there'll be a demand for it, hopefully.
Right. That would have been shit. If I was there, I'd be there in a heartbeat. But is there any for the UK? Because I know it's different all around the world. In the UK, where's the pandemic at for you guys? Is the possibility of playing out anytime soon? What's the outlook looking like for you guys?
Gigs have been started to be arranged for some bands, obviously with restrictions in place, but I think promoters are starting to potentially see light at the end of the tunnel, but things can obviously change
Right.
in a heartbeat, and you know, we could be back a few steps in the future. We don't know, but I think we're potentially starting to see a positive shift, and we're sort of starting to plan a few new ideas for what's going to be in the new Divided by Design live show, which hopefully is going to be better than ever before.
Yeah, it's kind of obviously it sucks, all this stuff, but it's
Right.
kind of allowed us to kind of step back and really think about what we want to kind of do moving forward and make sure we're the best thing that can possibly be in terms of Divided by Design, you know.
There you go. So, I mean, I guess ultimately you're just taking the good with the bad and adapting and making the best of it, essentially.
Yeah, we're in a pretty lucky position where we can make this and, you know, and not have to worry about getting studios and whatnot.
Right. I guess, you know, being that it is 2020, technology is at that point to where it's possible for younger bands like you guys to be able to still record and write and communicate and put out a 5-track concept album and never leave the house, you know. So I think that's really cool. You know.
Well, he's not wrong though. That's how it went, wasn't it? Yeah. And it definitely was a lifesaver, being able to talk to each other over whatever it is, Facebook, messaging. It was just a lifesaver. Wouldn't have been able to do it without it.
Right. Well, any closing statements? I think we've talked for almost an hour now. Any closing statements you guys want to mention before we separate, I guess?
Go listen.
Go listen to the track. We've been working on a lot of stuff recently. In terms of what people are seeing now with the album, that was a lot of months' work in the past, and I'd like to say we're sort of ahead of the release by a good few months. So there's some big stuff coming.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's no end in sight for the releases or anything. We're going to keep going, keep hammering through. So stay tuned.
Well, you guys already know I'll be here, full support. You guys have been very supportive of me and the podcast, and just like I said in the beginning of the episode, this is the 4th time you guys have been on Straight to the Core, which is me, since you guys are from the UK and I'm from, you know, Illinois and everything. So it's crazy how also technology has allowed people like us to connect and be able to have this conversation, you know, when you guys are, you know, 2,000 miles that direction.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. Thanks for keeping us on. It's been
we really appreciate
cool.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's more for me, since you guys were there in the beginning, you know, when I didn't have much going on. You know, I was an infant podcast, if you will, and you guys came out of nowhere. And
well, it's the same for us, really. Like, you were kind of the only one who listened to us at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, no one. I was emailing loads of people, and you were kind of the only one who was like, "Yeah, I like this. Let's get it on." You know,
yeah.
We really appreciate that, because it kind of helped us kind of move forward. Yeah.
definitely.
Very cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So definitely humbleness all around, I suppose.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Help the young grow the young, I guess. But yeah, it's really awesome to have you guys here. Thank you, Tom, Liam, Joe, for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this. And I'll be doing a track by track review. I think I mentioned this in the beginning. I don't know if I mentioned it when we were recording or not, but I know I talked to you guys about it.
Yeah.
But for the listeners,
Yeah.
I'll be doing a bonus episode, a track by track review of Stages 2 Osiris that'll follow this episode. I'm not sure on a release date, probably sometime midweek next week. Yeah, stay tuned for that. And thank you guys so much for being a part of this episode 37 of Straight to the Core.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Till next time,
Thanks.
because I know damn well there'll be a next time. That's for sure.
I hope so, yeah.
Sure.
Definitely.
Be a regulars on Straight to the Core.
Hell
But
yeah.
thanks so much, guys. You have a great night. And
Yeah.
And you. Well, you have
You
a good
too.
one,
You too.
whatever.
it's 2 in the afternoon, so it's not.
Have a good afternoon.
Alrighty. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Thanks.
See you soon.